Management Services Administrator in 2017 and named Acting Director of Budget Management Services in September 19. And the website is still not said when you got appointed to be the actual director now of management and budget, but that is what he is, and he's been that for several years, but the website hasn't been updated. So he's going to give us a presentation on the budget. If you would all please take notes while he's doing that so you can ask your questions at the end, okay? So take notes on what questions you want to ask, and then you can ask them when he's finished with the presentation. Can I have a round of applause for Kevin?
Really loud.
Okay, if you talk really loud and you don't need this, you can put this on the table.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome.
All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll try to go this route as best I can. There is a lot of slides and information, so if I take a water break, please bear with me. I'm going to be trying to talk fast to save time for the questions at the end. And my name is Kevin Chatelier. I've spoke to this group for several years now and presented the city manager's proposed budget that's up for consideration. As part of the budget process, city manager puts together a proposed budget, and ultimately from the point in time it's proposed throughout the month of April, public input, a couple of public hearings will take place. This year it's April 19th and April 25th. There'll be a slide here in a moment that I'll give you the locations of that and the times. So this is part of the budget process where we get active public participation in the budget process, feedback, and City Council takes that information into consideration, going into what they call the reconciliation process, where they will look to amend, make changes to the city manager's proposed budget for ultimate adoption in May. That one is much smaller, and that'd be nice. My employees joke, like, because I walk around the office like this, and they're like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. It looks like a big baby bottle. And so now I'm like, yeah, that's true. So thank you for the smaller one. So jumping into the slides, looking at the proposed budget, here's some high-level highlights. Overall, the proposed budget's anticipated to grow about 3.4% from the current year's adopted budget to the proposed city manager's budget. Looking at FTEs, the proposed budget includes a recommendation for an net increase of 130.4 FTEs overall, 110.6 of those with the city and 19.8 for the schools. The following slides will get more into detail about those. High-level expenditures, the proposed budget is positioned to maintain all baseline services being provided in the current year's operating budget. And there are, and we'll get into more details of these, some enhanced services enhanced investments to maintain some of those services based on feedback, input from City Council and the residents in priority areas of need. Looking at the revenues, the most revenues are anticipated to grow compared to the current year's operating budget. However, they're not growing at the rate that they had the last couple of years. And again, we'll get into more detail about that, but basically we're seeing revenue growth return to its pre-pandemic historical growth trends on average about 3%. And I'll also get into more detail about this. There are a few fee adjustments and primarily related to the waste management fee of water and service charges that are proposed to increase in the proposed budget as well. And again, I'll jump into more details of those in just a little bit. Some quick background information. This hasn't changed much from whenever I presented this information about a year ago. City Council, since the very beginning of the pandemic, has made several initiatives to provide fiscal relief to the residents and businesses within the city of Virginia Beach. Taking a look at this graph here, or the slide here, just by looking at real estate, you can see that Virginia Beach lowered its real estate tax rate by 2.75 cents in FY22. And in the adopted current year's budget, FY23, as opposed to increasing the tax rate, City Council dedicated a portion of the real estate tax rate which growth occurred through assessment growth. They dedicated that for the purposes of the $567 million bond referendum. And in doing so, City Council, in a sense, is provided about $52 million in tax relief for tax avoided costs to residents in Virginia and businesses in Virginia Beach. Personal property, several initiatives over the last several years, with the most recent being their decision to apply fair market valuation to personal property vehicles. Everybody's certainly familiar with the chip shortage that's been going on, and the used car market has just gotten outrageous with used car prices being way overvalued. So when City Council saw this last year, and they were informed that, hey, for the first time, used vehicle values are actually appreciating as opposed to depreciating, City Council decided to opt to apply a fair market valuation approach, and they reduced the overall assessed value of those vehicles by 25%, resulting in a tax avoidance of $38 million to residents. I won't get too much more of the weeds like that unless you'll ask me to, sorry. Some other initiatives quickly back during the pandemic related to business relief. They suspended alcohol or the ABC license taxes for businesses and didn't require them to pass along that charge to the businesses. And then most recently in December of 22, City Council passed an ordinance to reduce the BPOL tax rates and the BPOL tax thresholds for businesses within Virginia Beach, resulting in a tax avoidance or a tax reduction of about $1.1 million. And you can see there's some other initiatives. Most notable with those initiatives is the allocation of local fiscal relief initiatives and federal fiscal relief initiatives, totaling about $77 million. That's through a combination of availability of ARPA, CARES Act funding over the last several years, and local funds that were allocated to nonprofit organizations such as United Way and LIST to aid businesses and residents. But overall, fiscal relief or assistance over the last several years has translated to close to $182 million. So, as I was saying earlier about the revenue growth, early last fall, when we began developing the proposed operating budget, it was very clear that this budget was not going to go like the last couple of budgets that we were working on. We were seeing revenue growth, slight trend, slow growth. We were also familiar that stimulus funding there's nothing in the plan works for federal government or state to provide direct relief to localities, as occurred over the last couple of years, which allowed the city to make different resource allocation decisions. We were facing high inflationary pressures, just like everybody else. The city is certainly subject to that, to inflation as well. With typical inflation on operating accounts, CPI as of January is 6.1%. And when you're looking at other more specific cost of goods related to construction, we're seeing CPI and construction costs increase as high as 48% for some projects. So something else the city's been struggling with, just like much of the rest of the country, are the leftover impacts of the Great Resignation. Those in this room are certainly familiar with City Council actions, and you all follow Council closely. You're familiar City Council's been making great strides in trying to reduce the impact on this and be an attractive employer to get the men and women to be able to fill the positions so we can deliver the services to the residents of Virginia Beach. Progress has been made. So for context, a year ago at this time, we had about 1,000 vacancies. City has 7,000, about 7,500 employees, and about 1,000 of those were vacant at this point in time. Based on a recent report out by the Human Resources Department to the City Council, those are down to about the pre-pandemic levels, closer to about 700. So we've seen an improvement in those, and that's typically about the normal level of vacancies that the city has. Those aren't all necessarily long-term vacancies, but that's typically the churn that you see in any given year with a workforce of about 7,500 employees. So as we were working on the operating budget, we had several guiding principles that we were trying to, sorry.
Uh-oh.
Oh, man.
Watch him, Robbie. He's a one
Man, the
person.
devil said that's lost.
In your path soon.
Sorry.
It's a dirt dauber, I think.
It's not the one. Step on it.
Oh, good shooting.
Kevin, why can't you do that with tax increases?
Stomp him on it.
That is sadly the most physical exercise I've had in the last 6 months. So forgive me if I'm winded.
Somebody bring him a water.
Yeah.
That's
So-
baby bottle.
Jumping back to the guiding principles, so we were really developing the budget with the goal of maintaining baseline services. In addition to that, we knew that City Council had expressed some interest and need in some priority areas such as communication efforts, the recruitment retention I was previously talking about, homeless services, and grant opportunities. One of the other things that was just recently conducted by the city was a resident citizen satisfaction survey. This is something that we typically have conducted every couple of years. And so the report out occurred last January to City Council. And so there's really 6 overarching categories within that those results were grouped within. So the order of the presentation, I tried to overlay that and incorporate some of that information as best I could. So if y'all get bored of just listening to me, you can see some numbers on there to see what the residents feel about some of those services. Another picture, looking at the operating budget, here's a visual of a pie graph. As you can see from the pie graph, the largest portion of the city's investment, about 45% of the total operating budget is represented by the department or by schools, with the next largest portion of the pie related to the infrastructure type departments such as planning, public works, public utilities, and then public safety at 12.4%.
Could you speak up just a little
Yeah.
bit?
Do I need the microphone?
I think the bottom turns it on, the button on the bottom.
About now?
Yeah. Yes.
Does that help? Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Man, I am solving all kinds of problems. Lost microphone. All right. I could start over. We might run out of time. I think this is the information that everybody really wants to hear about anyways. So looking at the proposed budget related to public safety, you can see here from the graph, this is part of the resident satisfaction survey that I was talking about with the results. So for example, the efforts to ensure the community is prepared for emergency disasters, Virginia Beach residents scored City of Virginia Beach's services or satisfaction with those services about 70.1%. And then you can see the Atlantic region, the average score was 42.9 and national average 27.2. So this is just being provided for some level of context as I speak about some of the initiatives that are included in the proposed budget. First, related to public safety, when looking at the baseline needs, there was a need to annualize some of the costs and initiatives that are currently underway, such as the body-worn camera program. I think everybody has come to realize the importance of the body-worn camera program, not just for the safety of the residents, but also the safety of police officers as well. That comes with an annual operating cost. So there was a need to provide additional resources for that, so that way it didn't negatively impact the police department's operations. So there was a need to add $2 million to the police department's baseline operations to cover that contract next fiscal year. There was also a need to plus up additional resources to the sheriff's office in the neighborhood of about $6 million. Part of that was a result of reduced revenue coming in from the state related to inmate per diem reimbursements going down. Inmate populations in the correctional facility are temporarily down as there's a backlog in the courts, and the courts have been shut down during the pandemic, so there's kind of a little bit of a backlog for that. However, there's a need to maintain those services, and without additional resources, the sheriff's office would have had to ended up reducing or eliminating the centralized booking services that they provide for the police department, and that would have been certainly a negative impact on baseline services. look into some of the plus-ups or the additional resources added. So looking a little bit further, the police department, 11 FTEs are added to the proposed FY24 operating budget. So back during the pandemic, and I just previously mentioned, the city was struggling filling the positions, so we had a high number of vacancies. The police department was certainly one of those departments. And in acknowledging that over the last several years, the police department made a concerted effort to reclassify those sworn positions that they knew that they were not going to be able to fill to civilian type positions to address other needs. So for example, with the new police department coming online at the near City Hall, there's going to be a real-time crime center in the police department. By reclassifying some of those sworn vacancies to civilians, they were able to fill those positions and have staff ready to operate that real-time crime center, allowing the badges and the cops to go out and do sworn law enforcement duties and work the beat as opposed to sitting in the crime lab. Some other initiatives, some police tech positions. So again, this is the police department requesting these FTEs to free up badges so they can get out and do law enforcement duties. So what they're finding is, based on technology advancements and the level of data that's being stored on mobile devices and hard drives, is taking a large amount of time and effort for detectives and police departments to go dig in and unencrypt that information and be able to extract the information that they're needing. So these two positions will allow them to do that with these specialized positions and free up the detectives to, as the city manager always says, catch backups. 3 firefighters are being proposed to include. These will be firefighter safety positions. So something the fire department is experiencing is battalion chiefs when going en route to a call because of technology and the needs to have the information ready and on hand when arriving to the scene. They're finding that they're operating computers, cell phones, and other devices in the car, and it's creating a little bit of an unsafe situation. So what the fire department's requesting these FTEs for is to allow them to have an extra firefighter staff to be able to assist the battalion chief in getting to the scene safely, and then once there, being able to add an additional fire position to whatever the emergency at hand is. EMS services. So everybody's probably familiar that the city of Virginia Beach is very unique in the way that we receive emergency medical services. We have long relied on a 100% volunteer-based response squad. There's several different volunteer rescue squads throughout the city, and they've done a great job over the many decades providing the service at no cost to residents and very little cost to the city. In fact, I'd say it's quite the opposite. It's been a huge cost savings to the city over the years. However, the pandemic has not been particularly kind to them. They're seeing a decline in the amount of donations that they're receiving, making it difficult to purchase ambulances, to purchase the equipment, the supplies they need to run the ambulances, but also volunteerism is down. This isn't just a trend in Virginia Beach. This is going on nationwide. Volunteerism is just down overall. So what they're finding is, coming out of the pandemic, whenever they actually do get volunteers now, they're having to work those volunteers so much to staff the ambulances that they're burning them out. So every time they take one step forward, it's like they take 2 steps back. So this being the primary resource and way that residents of Virginia Beach receive medical transport to hospitals and medical emergency care, the proposed budget's requesting additional FTEs. This mentions 40.6, but specifically for this purpose is 38 FTEs. This will ensure that EMS is able to staff 2 ambulances as well as a zone car on a daily basis. You'll see here, if you can, and if not, then I'll read it, a $700,000 grant is included in the proposed budget for the volunteer rescue squads. As I mentioned, their revenue collections are down. Donations aren't what they were pre-pandemic, and they're struggling to meet their operational needs as well as their capital needs through ambulances. and it's thought that through this grant contribution from the city, that they'll be able to get some support going forward. Their initial request was $2.5 million. However, we weren't able to find enough resources for that in FY24, so the proposed budget is recommending $700,000. The last bullet point there are 12 Commonwealth attorney positions. So back to the body worn camera initiative, there's a state code requirement that for localities that have implemented body worn camera initiatives, that you are to provide a certain number of positions to Commonwealth attorneys on based on a ratio of per camera. I believe the ratio is 1 FTE for every 75 cameras being implemented. So recently, with the expansion of the body worn camera contract to every police officer, it's resulted in a need to provide additional staff to the Commonwealth attorney, it's their responsibility to review all the footage to make a determination as to whether there's a need to prosecute.
Real quickly, is that office staff, attorneys, or a combination?
That is a good question. The code says it's to be attorneys. However, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office has always worked with us, and he's not actually asking for attorneys. He's asking for additional support staff positions, paralegals, other type staff positions like that, which will actually cost less.
Yeah, that's why I was
Yes.
wondering. Okay. Thank you.
Another area of the resident satisfaction survey is with Parks and Rec, Library, and Human Services. So again, you can see the satisfaction ratings across the top of the slide there. Some notable restoration of services and investments that are included in the proposed budget are 4 library positions, which will, if provided, restore central library hours on Sunday. These were eliminated during the early stages of the pandemic and have not returned. So with these positions, they'll be able to have Sunday hours at the central library again. Something else that's included in the proposed budget is the elimination of library fines and fees. This is something that libraries is finding as being a barrier to those that are in most need of library services. It's a nationwide trend that's going on, and it's something that other localities have certainly experienced as well. They've seen an uptick in the amount of circulation and utilization of the libraries by eliminating these fees. The impact of that by eliminating these is a lost revenue of just over $100,000. Noting the third bullet point down here, 5 positions for human services with the goal of restoring the pathway services. So the pathway services provided by Human Services is one of 2 crisis intervention units that are within the region. This is something that they've struggled with filling and maintaining and having the service available over the last year, as they're having difficulty finding qualified nurses and retaining those nurses to be able to provide these services. So including these additional FTEs and these resources, it's creating flexibility for Human Services to find a pathway to restore these pathway services for adult mental health services in Virginia Beach. Another initiative that's included is the annualized costs related with the Parks After Dark program. So this is a mayor and vice mayor initiative, which was something that was put forward by City Council earlier this year. So the goal of this is for outreach initiatives and efforts to deter youth violence within the city. So this is something that Parks and Rec is spearheading and implementing, and I believe 2 parks within the city, 1 park within the city this summer. This is a little bit in the weeds, and this will make sense to individuals whenever I get to the CIP section. However, the city has a Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund that supports the operation and maintenance of Parks and Rec facilities. It's supported through a 3.476 cent real estate tax dedication that was put in place and dedicated with the passing of bond referendums to construct the facilities years ago. So something that's happened over the course of time is that the dedication is being used to not only cover the operation and support of those facilities and the maintenance of those facilities, but over time, other programs that have typically been viewed as general fund initiatives and programs have been utilizing and negatively impacting the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund. So this is something that was brought to light and presented to City Council based on the current projected trend of the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund. Without additional general fund support, it's on a sustainable path. So something that the proposed budget's looking to do is right-size the special revenue fund, and in doing so, the proposed budget's not utilizing any fund balance for ongoing services and operations, and that's resulting in the general fund giving a contribution increase or increase of those, utilizing an additional $3.8 million of general fund resources to support the parks and the parks operations. And that'll make more sense whenever I get to the CIP section, I promise. Some other initiatives related to development services. This is a section of the resident satisfaction survey that included economic development as well as code enforcement and housing. Some notable recommendations included in the proposed budget is 1 FTE within the Department of Economic Development to establish a presence at the Hive office, which is the office that's at Town Center. It acts as an incubator system for SWAM businesses, small women and minority-owned businesses. In addition to that, some additional resources are included to make enhancement in workforce-related and workforce development initiatives. Additional resources have been included in the proposed budget in the amount of $250,000 to the Department of Parks and Rec for the purpose of homeless encampment cleanup. So this is a request that came from Parks and Rec. What they're finding is as they go in, as homeless encampments are moved from public spaces, there's some serious hazmat concerns that need a considerable amount of cleanup to take place and occur to make the area safe. So this is $250,000 will allow Parks and Rec to do that through a contractual service. The last bullet point are 6 FTEs that are being proposed to be added to the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation. So these are really for the purposes of homeless prevention services as well as rental assistance. So something important to note about these 6 FTEs is that Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation is utilizing HUD dollars, state and federal dollars, to support majority of these positions, relying, I believe, on only about $9,000 of general fund need to support these 6 positions. In the area of customer service and community engagement, as you can see from the resident satisfaction survey, this is an area that residents certainly indicated the city needed to do a better job in. The 2 positions being proposed for communications office, this is specifically for the purpose of trying to make an enhancement and improvement in the level of community engagement. City Council is operating under the district system, and there's many more events that they're doing within those districts to get engaged with the residents of their district. Communications office is spearheading this initiative, and so with this additional support, they'll be able to do a lot more and provide, they're anticipated to be able to meet the needs of the residents and council. Within the city manager's office, there's 2 constituent affair positions being proposed in the budget. So what that means is, right now, individuals that call the city manager's office, they will receive, somebody will take the call, and then they'll give them another point of contact within the city to be able to run down and speak to. So with these 2 positions, the city manager's office will be able to be a location where residents can call in, and then we'll speak to one person, and that person will be the individual responsible for getting back and getting the individual the information that they requested. The last 2 bullet points, there's a need for additional resources within the general registrar's office. They're finding that they're having a difficulty keeping up with the voting regulation changes and law changes that recently took place, same-day voting, mail-in ballots. So this position is anticipated to get them back in line with other comparable localities in terms of workforce metrics. And then the 3rd bullet point is It's for Public Works. So something that Public Works is finding is that they're really good engineers, just not super good at communicating the engineering stuff to the public. So the thinking behind this position is the city has a lot of initiatives and programs out there to provide flood relief for individuals. We have grant programs that allow individuals to reach out and explore opportunities to get their houses elevated if they're experiencing recurrent flooding. There's other state and federal grant programs that are in place as well. So the thinking with this position is this can be a point of contact to help those individuals learn about those opportunities, in addition to giving them a sense of where their property is in terms of the overall flood protection program and investment initiative through the bond referendum. Looking at infrastructure and transportation. So this is primarily related to the Department of Public Works. So as you can see from the resident indicators up above, some of the areas that are notable need of improvement are street lighting, as well as ADA accessibility in street and sidewalks. So the interesting thing is we were working on the operating budget and receiving these proposals back in early December. And then when the resident satisfaction survey came out and we got the results in January, Public Works had already made these requests. So they knew this is an area that was in need of additional investment and resources. So the first bullet points related to electricians, specifically to make improvements in the street lighting program and that initiative and replacing the current lights with LED street lights. And then there's also included in the proposed budget a planner estimator to manage the contract that the city's looking to plus up and make additional investment of $1.3 million in FY24 related to the ADA initiatives I was previously noting, such as sidewalks, curb gutter, the street appeal, and the things needed to take some of the areas currently out of ADA compliance and get them in ADA compliance. And then something else, one of the two positions I previously mentioned for the city manager's office is also to act as a ADA compliance officer and help coordinate those efforts throughout the city. Looking at stormwater, this is certainly no surprise as to why the residents scored this low. They also overwhelmingly approved the bond referendum the previous year with 72%, I believe, approving that $567 million bond referendum. Some additional resources being included in the proposed budget for that initiative includes the software program MasterWorks. So the projects have resources and funding put to them, but now what Public Works is finding are they need the additional tools and the staff to be able to bring those projects to fruition. So with this MasterWorks tool, what they'll be able to do is actually get real-time tracking, monitoring, and report out of the status of each of the projects and the contracts and the spend against those contracts for each of the projects. So this is a really important tool that Public Works is looking to implement based on the input and guidance from their consultant. And then the last bullet point there is related to some FTEs that are being included, 5 in total for the purposes of implementing the stormwater initiative. Something else important to note about this is that these positions are being included or funded through the existing real estate tax dedication City Council has in place for stormwater. So the growth in that dedication is what's allowing them to fund these positions. Waste management. So this is an area I said that I would speak to. So the Waste Management Fund for several years has been in need of a fee adjustment. So it's been relying on assistance from the general fund, and it's been utilizing fund balance to maintain ongoing operations for the last couple of years. So the City Council had decided to defer this rate adjustment over the last couple of years as they didn't feel like it was the responsible thing to put it on individuals and residents during the pandemic. So knowing that it's on an unsustainable course, Public Works reached out to a consultant to do a rate study analysis. The consultant came back with a recommendation to increase the monthly fee by $3 with annual increases programmed every year for the next 6 years. the proposed budget does not make a recommendation to implement the full $3, but instead is requesting to increase the fee by $2.50. So this would put the monthly collection, or the monthly waste management fee to $27.50. So the reason that we're not making a recommendation for the full $3 is because there's several unknowns. The SIPSA tipping fee that the city pays to SIPSA to dispose and get rid of waste for the city of Virginia Beach, we pay them a certain dollar amount based on the tonnage. So there's some unknowns as to what the tipping fee for SIPSA is going to look like in the next several years. And in addition to that, there's some unknowns related to the city's recycling contract. So everybody might be familiar that Chesapeake just recently eliminated its recycling program. Part of that was because their contract with TFC was to go up exponentially. And so as opposed to increasing the fee and asking more of the residents, they made a conscious decision to eliminate that service and not provide it. The city has an existing contract with TFC, and they're locked into that contract until FY25, at which time the contract will expire, and we fully anticipate to maintain recycling services for the city. It's going to cost a substantial amount more than what it does right now. So with all those future unknowns at this point in time, the city manager and staff didn't feel it was appropriate to ask residents to pay more, as that need might not be there if those services go away and the policy decision is made for those services to go away in the future. So last thing before I get to utilities, something else that's notable is that waste collection services for Virginia Beach scored higher than the Atlantic and national averages in these categories. So everything that's circled in red, something important to note about this is it's really hard to benchmark waste management services and the fee that's collected on a monthly basis. Virginia Beach's will be $27.50, but that includes curbside pickup, recycling services, yard debris, landfill services, the hazardous waste, and bulk item pickup, which none of those are limited in terms of bulk item pickup, drop off at the landfill. Those are all covered by that $27.50 monthly fee. Other localities, they limit those services, or they charge additional charges for those services. So it could be part of the reason why residents feel like they get a good value for that $27 or $25 a month. And I skipped one. Getting back to utilities, this is the other one that I had mentioned on the front screen. So similar to waste management, utilities has been in need of a rate adjustment for a couple of years. City Council, again, did not want to put that burden on residents at a point in time when there was so much unknown about the pandemic, and so it was delayed. Knowing that it had been delayed and they had mandated and bond covenant needs, and they were on an unsustainable course, utilities, just like Public Works, reached out and received consultant services to conduct a rate study. And so the rate study, the consultant came back with a recommendation to increase the monthly, I'm going to skip ahead one, the monthly service charge for water, $77 per month, with an increase in the consumption rate of 30 cents per 1,000 gallons consumed. So it's important to note this is a multi-year plan, so this is just year one. It's a 5-year proposed plan, which isn't uncommon in looking at utility fee adjustments and proposed plans. Other localities have it, Norfolk, Chesapeake, some of those others. So water's getting more expensive, and the amount that's being consumed is going down, which is making it difficult for utility funds to meet their mandated requirements, EPA requirements, as well as maintain the bond covenant requirements as they issue and do have bonds. Something else that is worth noting on here is there's a proposed increase in the service the sewer connection. And that's in there as well, but it just doesn't have a bullet point, but it is included certainly in the proposed budget.
Quick one. Do y'all have something where the chemicals to treat the water is going massively up high?
I don't,
They didn't have that as a separate,
not as,
Okay.
not as a separate, I do know that one of the things that they were talking about is, and they said inflation was impacting them really heavily in a lot of their projects. And so I know that they have, like pipes, a lot of the construction pipe and material that they're using is going
yeah,
up
no, this is specifically chemicals, because that's
for
what
the
Chesapeake.
for the treatment of the water.
Yes, yeah, that was a huge issue in Chesapeake.
So the treatment of the water and occurs based on our contract with Norfolk.
Okay,
So we certainly maintain the pipe, but the treatment happens in the city of Norfolk, and we have a contract with Norfolk for that. They probably do have chemical, but it's not on a large scale like perhaps it might be in Chesapeake. Last thing on this, several of these fees that are being included for adjustment in the proposed budget, many of them haven't been adjusted since as far back as 2010. Looking at compensation,
I just wondered, what is the length of a month? I know these fees are normally charged per day, and the utility bill is always a different number of days. Is it a 30-day month or 31-day month?
so it is monthly billing that it goes out. I don't know if it's set by code in terms of what the number of days is within that month. I think it's just,
All these fees are charged so much per day. So because the bills vary, they're always different. I'm just, what is your month that you describe? It's charged for the increases. How long is the month?
Okay, can we keep the questions to the end?
Yeah.
To the end, yeah.
okay, I'm sorry. I'll circle back. I think I get there. Looking at compensation real quick, so the proposed operating budget is recommending a 5% compensation increase for city staff, full-time, part-time employees. Something notable is that this is, current year is the first year that the city's implemented a step plan, which put 80% of the city's workforce onto this step plan, such as fire, police. So that's why we've got the bullet points here kind of breaking up what that 5% would look like overall. But if individuals on a step plan, they'll be looking to get a 3% step adjustment with a 2% cost of living adjustment. And for individuals not on a step plan, they'll be looking to get a 3% merit increase and then a 2% general increase. Last bullet point here is there's no proposed increase in the employee health insurance premiums. This will be the 4th year in a row with not requesting or requiring employees to make an increased contribution to their health insurance premiums. And the city's budgeted contribution is to go up 3%. So for the general fund, that's about $1.5 million. Real quick on the schools. The school's operating budget put forth by and proposed by schools is projected to grow in line with the cities. The operating budget is primarily being driven by two sources of revenue, being the local revenue sharing formula and then state revenue. This here is reflective of what those year-over-year changes in that, with local contribution going up 28.5 million and the state contribution 27 million. Schools, they've made a concentrated effort to make an investment in their workforce. They're seeing a significant number of staffing shortages and challenges to staff their schools. So they're making a concerted effort to implement a market salary adjustment to remain competitive in the area. And so that's in the neighborhood ranging between $44 and $55 million. So anybody doing quick math, you can see that primarily schools are directing all their growth and revenue to that initiative in FY24. Something that's kind of difficult to do is get an indication of what that means on a per employee basis. So being that the city's looking to do 5% for each employee, in doing a market salary adjustment, it ranges. depending on where you are and which position you're at, you might be receiving an adjustment upwards of 12%, and some might be receiving an adjustment of 6%. But on average, it's about 8% per employee. The CIP, and I know we got 10 minutes, so that's, the CIP is a complicated topic to cover in 10 minutes. However, I will try to do it as best I can, but I'd rather jump to the questions. Okay, so high level, the total program CIP, or the capital improvement plan, is about $5.1 billion. So that's including all program funding that's been approved to date, which includes the bond referendum, as well as the program's 6-year CIP. For public safety, fire apparatus, that project required an additional $800,000 a year. So there's a CIP project which replaces fire apparatus and vehicles within the city. But due to the chip shortage and increase in vehicle costs, to maintain the schedule, replacing 2 to 3 fire trucks a year, a needed increase of $800,000 a year was necessary for that project. Some other notable projects is a new project for renovations and repair at the Mounted Police Maintenance Facility, and then for a law enforcement training academy study to obtain additional information for council. So a LEDA, a study for the LEDA Law Enforcement Training Academy. What was that?
Study? What kind of study?
Study. Facility needs. So the city last conducted one several years ago, and it was pre-pandemic. And so something that city council didn't have enough information and decision on is based on all law enforcement training needs, a combined training force needs of the sheriff's office, the police department, and what the future needs are going to look like, what's the space actually required. So previously, it was looked at based on the existing footprint of the Law Enforcement Training Academy located on Bird Neck Road, and this will be looking at other options to actually meet the needs of the police department. Some notable other plus-ups. It needs is in the area of Parks and Rec. New to the CIP is a Little Island Fishing Pier maintenance project. So that recent assessment found that pier is in poor condition. So an additional need of $1.2 million is needed to give an overhaul maintenance to make it again safe and operable for the public. This project here for the Rec Center Modernization Project, this is something I was talking about earlier and got in the weeds on, about the $3.8 million. Basically, that's trying to create capacity within the Parks and Rec Special Revenue Fund to make a more concerted effort to maintain the existing facilities. So additional $10 million is programmed in year 6 of the CIP, which will allow time for City Council to get the additional information they need to make a determination on which of the existing rec centers is in need of overhaul maintenance, and no particular priority order as of now. I'm going to skip through some notable other projects. Roadways. So roadways is by far the most complex and complicated CIP section we have. There's state and federal dollars sprinkled in throughout that, which creates existing obligations for CIP projects. You have to have local match dollars to secure the state and federal dollars. So some notable projects that received increases in the CIP are the Centerville 2, Centerville 3, and Rosemont Road project. Those project increases are the result of inflationary increases within the CIP. And to get those projects funded with local dollars and meet the state and federal match obligation, those as well as some other projects, there was a need to unfund or delay 9 other CIP projects. And I'll certainly get into those more, but try to move quick. This is the CIP, the page talking about that. Overall, The requested but not funded need for the CIP totaled $155 million of project ask and needs that we just weren't able to allocate resources to and fund. So for the 9 projects, part of the decision-making process was not just those 9 projects, where they're at in their construction timeline and what the need are for those, but also to complete those projects, there would have been a need to find $140+ million just for those 9 projects.
What were those 9 projects that they unfunded?
I can tell it to you. I do have it. I'm just trying to move quick. This next section is really the revenue section, and I can just pull up one slide. Katie is fast. It is the Shore Drive Corridor, Phase 4, Lansdowne Road, Phase 2. Yeah. Cleveland Street, Phase 4, Elbow Road Extension, Phase 2D, Farrell Parkway, Pleasure House Road Street Improvement, Phase 1 and 2, Ships Corner Road Improvement, and the Centerville Rec Center. Probably the place for me to end this on so I get to questions is the revenue slide. So here's just a little bit more granular picture of the revenue by source, and you can see some of the plus up changes and some of the ones that are going down. If I had more time, I would absolutely nerd out and talk about revenue trends and real estate and personal property, but I want to get to the questions that have queued up on me. Something that we don't shy away from, and something we include in the executive summary and the presentation, which is on the city's website, is a tax burden measure and look at what the impact is on residents. So for those, I'm not going to dive into the math, but it's out there. So what this represents is the due to the assessment growth in real estate value on a single family median home value. That translates to about $300 a year, and it's broken down on a monthly charge because a lot of people escrow, majority of people escrow, not everybody. And then on a monthly basis, you can see what that is stacked up with the other proposed utility and waste management fee changes. Overall, about $30.35 a month. This is just another look at real estate. So the last thing that I'll try to explain with this is this graph is just giving a visual of what the rates by Hampton Roads localities are and what they've been dating back to 2018. So you can just see the change in rates. And then the table over to the right, that's just reflective of what the budgeted revenue growth is, budget to budget for those. So for example, Hampton reduced its real estate tax rate by 6 cents. But budget to budget, its real estate still grew 10.3%. So it was receiving a 16% growth in assessment base. And through the 6 cent reduction, they offset a portion of that and retained the remaining 10.3% revenue growth for the baseline operations. So with all that being said, I know it's a lot, I know it's a mouthful.
Yep. Ready for questions?
My little girl's out of gymnastics now. I'm all good. I'm here. I can answer questions. So.
Okay, so I have several questions on employees. Okay, so it said from your first slide, city net full-time employee increase of 130. But year after year, you're not able to fill all those positions, and so, but you keep asking for more positions. City positions are not met. Where do the funds come from? Where do the funds go at the end of the year? How many resignations, how many retirements? So that's all about city employees.
Okay, so progress has been made in filling the vacancies, like I was saying earlier. I might not have been talking to the microphone, so I've got the microphone now. I'll say it again. So pre-pandemic, the city had on average about 700 vacancies as part of the churn. We got to a pandemic high of about 1,000 vacancies that the city had. So recently, HR provided a report where progress has been made, and so we're back down to our pre-pandemic number of about 700. So the vacancy savings that occur from those positions Keep in mind, not all of them are within the general fund. But, so what we end up doing is there's $10 million that's included in the proposed FY24 operating budget in attrition savings to balance the budget. We're anticipating vacancies of about 5%. And so from that 5% vacancy savings that we're anticipating, $10 million is being used, it's about $36 million in the general fund. $10 million is being used to balance the budget, and the remaining $26 million is being used as a fund balance cash source in the following year's CIP. So it's being managed, it's just what that allows is if something happens and the city's cash position changes, what the city council then has the ability to do is 2 CIP processes, wait 2 years, they're able to make strategic reductions in the CIP, eliminating the need for that cash, and so it's managed in that manner.
So you defer
Okay.
to the
CIP.
CIP.
All right, so, in the beginning, you said the real estate taxes were lowered by 2.7 cents last year, which is not really true because the rate was the same, right? And what is the tax increase we can expect caused by the increase in budget spending?
So the rate reduction took place between 21 and 22. The
Oh,
2
so it
point-
wasn't last year?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
and I apologize, so when I said 22, I was just thinking 22. So between 21 and 22, the tax rate itself was reduced 2.75 cents. Between 22 and 23, the tax rate remained the same. As a matter of fact,
The tax increase.
yeah, it's right here. So.
Okay, yeah,
the-
when you said
the-
last year,
Yeah,
I
I'm
was like, no,
sorry.
that didn't happen.
In 23, so basically, the revenue grew 9.4%. The bond referendum, so dedicated was 4.4% equivalent of that, with the remaining 5% staying in the base. So yes, the rate did not change. However, the assessed growth did result in overall revenue growth.
In a tax increase? Yes.
Increase.
Okay, so why can't you take the funds out of the tip fund instead of raising taxes?
I mean, city council can't. And I mean, that is the thing. It is a city council policy with the dedications being structured the way that they are. Several might remember several years ago that city council, during this point in time in the budget process, they utilized about $2.7 million of the tip fund for the purpose of replacing waste collection vehicles, because the waste collection fund had that, or waste management fund had that need. So it's certainly something that can be done. It's just a policy decision to be made.
So does your department, the budget department, review and determine where costs could be cut? If you were to lose revenue, what areas would you cut?
So city council has us going through that exercise now. So whenever I presented this to city council on the 21st, at the conclusion, city council asked for consideration of what a scalable tax reduction would look like, ranging between 1 cent and 4 cents. So we are certainly going through that exercise right now. It is something we do over the course of the budget process. If we're looking at revenues and projecting out, and it doesn't look like revenues are going to meet baseline needs, then we absolutely do that. We provide departments with a reduced target and ask them to come up with a 5% cut or 2% cut or whatever it is, and that's reviewed throughout the process by the city manager and his leadership team to put together, develop a proposed budget.
So are you committed to defer funds at the end of the next year's budget to keep taxes down?
So defer funds at the.
Are you committed to defer funds at the
They're
end of the
excess.
next
So-
year budget to keep funds down? You know you're gonna have a budget surplus at the end of the year, so
So declaring the surplus is, per state code, one of two ways in which real estate I guess, relief can be provided. So it is certainly a permissible use. One of the things that I was noting earlier is that the city has a fund balance policy of maintaining a fund balance of 8 to 12% of the following year's revenue. So basically, the city doesn't have a rainy day fund, if you will. So the city doesn't take funds, cash, and put it over into a fund and never touch it. The general fund is the rainy day fund.
You have contingency funds, isn't that for emergencies?
The contingency reserve, in looking at the CAFR, the 8 to 12% unassigned fund balance is what it is, yes.
Okay, how much of the budget is being spent on homeless services? Also, how much money does the city receive from state lotteries?
So state lotteries goes to the school. I think that one's a little challenging because it's mixed into the overall allocation that goes to schools. I would need to dive in and look at that one on the state's education website. And then, first one again, I'm sorry.
Oops, turned it over. How much of the budget is being spent on homeless services? I know there was a slide on that, but they had a question on it.
So the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation is what?
It's about 45 million, but that's not all homeless services.
Yeah, so the Department of Housing and Neighborhood Preservation is about $45 million. They do have a program initiatives in there related to homeless services. That would be a better,
And it's mostly federally funded.
And that's mostly federal, any state funding in that?
yeah, there's state funding as well.
Okay, right. Volunteer EMS, what form of tax relief is provided as incentives for the EMS volunteers?
So personal property. So city council established a lowered personal property vehicle tax rate for EMS volunteers. I believe there's another program in place. Nope, that's it? Okay. Katie, correct me. That's it, personal property.
Okay, that's on that same thing. Volunteers, ambulance, required to receive COVID shot. How did mandating the shot reduce volunteers or city positions? Were there any mandates on that would have prevented anybody from staying?
I don't know. I know that there were several localities that mandated it and
Did we?
required their workforce. The city of Virginia Beach did not have that.
Okay. City not able to fund 2.5 million for rescue. What happened to the 40 million in surpluses?
40 million in surpluses.
I guess it was a 40 million surplus.
In terms of like year end, so
Oh, in fund
Yeah,
balance,
so-
there was,
so-
yeah, but we couldn't do 2.5 million for rescue.
I got it. So the fund balance, the attrition and everything at the end of the year that ends up being the surplus or the amount that falls to fund balance. So whenever that goes through the year-end fund balance allocation, that becomes the unassigned fund balance, making up that 8 to 12% fund balance policy. So in FY22, the unassigned fund balance amount was about 13.5%.
Are there any full-time employees, something being considered for EMS 911 operators?
I don't know.
No. Who are the companies performing the studies? Are they friendly with city council?
I can honestly say, luckily, I don't know the contractor that they're talking about, so.
How many consultants were used in this proposal? How much were they paid? And did any of them save taxpayers' money?
I don't know. Are you talking about like the rate consultants?
Yeah,
So
because you were saying you use consultants and surveys for all that.
So there are two separate contracts, and utilities had a separate contract, and waste management had a separate contract. I can't recall the vendors off the top of my head.
Okay,
Arcadis?
We can find out how much it costs.
Yeah.
okay, we can get back to it. Okay, there was a couple on the tip fund again. Okay, we got on Atlantic Park project as of April 1st, how much of the taxpayer dollars have been pledged, and like my investments, I get a return on my investment. What is the projected return on investment? When can we expect to see the first check?
For the.
From Atlantic Park. That would be the dome site.
Yeah, it just made the news this morning about them closing on the bonds. So I think the construction will begin and likely be finalized in 2025. Just trying to, so through the revenue stabilization period, I think they believe that's gonna take a year or two for it to meet its full revenue potential before we can actually get into so we're probably talking 27, before we can actually see what it's turning around and generating in terms of actual generated tax revenue.
Did they get funding yet for their part?
So as a part of the agreement, so the city is going to be issuing bonds for the project sooner rather than later for the parking facility, which would be the public infrastructure part of it. So I believe we'll just be issuing those soon, but in terms of what they've received, I'm not familiar that we've actually given anything to Venture as of today.
Well, we've done like infrastructure around it, $76 million worth of landscapes, buying property, et cetera.
In terms of city investment and spending on the public, there has been expenditures that have occurred. But in terms of how much of that would have gone to Venture, I'm not.
Okay. Okay, what is budgeted for something in the water, and what was our cost last year?
So there's actually no budgeted line item, right?
There's no budget line item.
Because it's but for revenues is the structure of the existing agreement. So the event generates revenue, remits the revenue to the city, and then the city remits that back. So they retain the but-for revenues of that without it necessarily being a direct contribution from the city to the event.
Okay, so sales, the taxes from the sales and stuff like that will go to the city, and they will get a portion of that back.
So not the sales.
The, ticket sales?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I'm thinking general sales tax. Yes,
Ticket.
so that's exactly how it works. So they get to retain the ticket sales, the tax generated from the ticket sales, and then the meals tax within the geographical boundary.
All of them?
Yes, yes. and
All of it,
I
so
believe so.
however much it is, they get all of it.
the entertainment.
And we won't know until, okay. All right. How are public-private contracts even afforded if all costs to survive and monies to pay for necessary services are not met due to the pandemic? Not sure I understand
Read it
that.
again?
How are private-public contracts even afforded if all costs to survive and monies to pay for them, pay for necessary services are not met due to the pandemic?
So is that, I think that question's getting at, so how are public-private partnerships paid for if all the other resources are being utilized just to keep the lights on, basically?
Sounds right.
So, whenever I'm talking about the baseline services, that would be the keeping the lights on as well as maintaining all existing agreements and initiatives currently underway. So if we do get into that cut mode, resources aren't able to keep up with those, then that's when all those decision points come to the table and decisions are made as to what would go away and what would not go away. Does that answer it?
I hope so. Wasn't my question. Does that answer it?
That's not my question.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
E-tickets, 600K is this a per-year software upgrade cost? And if so, does the e-ticket program violation fees cover the software program upgrades?
That's a good question, and I can answer it. All right, so that is the annual ongoing cost related to the e-ticketing software. There is not a fee, there's not a fee associated with offsetting that, so that does compete or require additional general fund resources to cover it.
Okay, how much money did the city reappropriate in total from in 2022 from all projects, departments, et cetera?
Yeah, that one's tricky. So, like schools, for example, right? So the schools had the reversion formula and city council appropriated the reversion to schools in the neighborhood of about $48 million. So not every department goes through that practice. So we have what is a carry forward process, which allows, an example of a carry forward process is, hey, Waste Management was trying to get that truck and they weren't able to secure that truck because the vendor didn't have the supplies and equipment. So there's a need, that truck's really needed, so those funds would be brought forward to the new fiscal year for the purposes of purchasing that existing truck. So that's a process that city council goes through. It's called the carry forward process, and I think the one that the city did this year was about $7 million for the $7 million for the general fund, but it's not super sizable every year.
I don't know if this is funded, but does the plan for bikeways and trails implementation require the purchase of land, or is it all city-owned easements? I know we can give them the Norfolk Southern right-of-way.
That would be great.
So, luckily Katie has a CIP. So the project scope and description does not include site acquisition, and that being the case, it would not be allowable to purchase land through the existing scope.
specific bikeway project.
Right.
Okay, why aren't TIP funds used to repair the road since the traffic increases are because of the tourists? Right,
So it is happening in one of them, right? So the TIP fund is utilizing TIP resources for the Atlantic Park, or not Atlantic Park, Atlantic Avenue street construction improvement. It funded a portion of the, or not a portion, it funded the 19th Street project, the street renovation, and there's 17th Street is another one that is to be TIP funded.
okay. I don't know what train burn is, but they say testing the water for runoff from train burn.
Train burn with the new car crashed and they set it on fire.
But that wasn't here.
No, but they're testing in other different states.
Oh, do you think it's running down here?
I don't know, they
From-
just
It was
tested
in
in West.
South Carolina or east somewhere. I'm not sure if it's gonna reach here or not.
No, I think it was in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania where they had that
Yeah.
train and
It's Ohio.
is there already
So-
like runoff coming down here? That-
So I mean, Gaston, right, that would be the waterway. So Virginia Beach gets its water from Lake Gaston in North Carolina.
I know.
So I'm not certain if Lake Gaston is one that, and this waterway is one that's gonna be contaminated or could possibly be contaminated from that. But I'm sure public utilities would certainly be mindful of that and monitoring that if it is in fact one
They
of
do
the
that on a
ones.
regular basis, do they
Right.
not? Okay, so in your presentation, you had step and no step, 3% and then 2%. So they're both getting, no matter whether you're step or no step, a 5% raise.
5%, correct.
Okay, so there's nothing different there. And when you were going over the stormwater and some program that you had there, I don't know what it was, will they be able to track which drains have been checked and done and which ones haven't, and which lakes still need to be dredged and,
Supposedly, yes. So
supposedly they'll be able to track all that?
And so this Masterworks tool is, the real thing driving this is the flood protection, but it's not only for those bond referendum projects. What they will also be able to do with this tool are the other stormwater maintenance type projects, in which will allow them to capture that data and collect that as to which roadways or which ditches, which drainage pipes have been cleaned and maintained, and so it will help them track the progress of those maintenance projects as well.
Awesome, awesome. All right, can you explain the whole thing about the requirement of a tax increase when the assessments go up, that you're required to put out a public hearing
Yes.
on raising our taxes? Could you explain that whole thing?
I can.
Good.
Okay,
Are they
so
B and C?
do we need coffee? Is this gonna be a long one? Okay, so, the need for the public hearing requirement is per General Assembly action. So there's a state code requirement that's very specific as to what the ad size has to be and the language and the terminology in it. So it'll determine an effective tax rate, a neutral tax rate, and so it defines what those are and the calculation that what those are to be. So basically, the calculation for that is this. So the existing land base for '23 compared to the same existing land base in '24, not including new construction, it's that assessment growth that is captured in the calculation. That's the overall calculation.
And that's 9.4%?
No,
So when are you required to lower it? Above 1%?
Above 1%.
correct.
Yes. So, and that triggers, that's a good point, that ad and the need for that ad triggers anytime the assessment base that I was talking about, the existing land to the existing land, when that assessment increases by 1% or more. So that triggers the need for the ad. And then the ad basically walks through the calculation of, okay, so because of this assessment increase, if you are to receive no growth in revenue from this assessment increase, from this existing land value to the now increased land value, then you need to reduce the tax rate to this dollar amount.
Like
And
a
then-
revenue neutral, so that the city doesn't get more money because
Right.
your assessment went
And then
up.
that would keep the revenue from, the budgeted revenue from where it was in 1 year to the exact same level in the following year.
Yeah, just on real estate,
Correct.
Well,
not
there
on
it is,
any, not on any other
9.4%.
tax. So, did we answer everybody's question, or does somebody have another
One
one?
quick one.
Well, this one is kind of like the end. Chesapeake was 1.7%, what's 1.7 cents on your real estate. Do you have this online and your contact information?
No, that was something different, but yeah,
That's what it
it's
says.
online. This is online, right?
It is,
It is.
yes.
Okay.
In fact, it is in the newsletter that went out. Here, you want to read the budget, click here.
So Diane, so is this where our money is going to or supposed to be?
Yes, but I think, Bob,
No, the question
You
I
had a
had
que-
was exactly that. Were these particular slides online? So
Yes.
If you skip some, I'd like to get.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh, this one, this particular slide presentation, this
Yes.
online?
It is
Online.
posted on the city's website, Budget Management Services. If you find our department, and you can find the
It's budget.virginiabeach.gov. It's really
Yeah.
easy.
budget.virginiabeach.gov.
Quick one. Your e-ticketing.
Okay, well, hold on.
While the slide's up,
Bill.
maybe you can explain this succinctly for me. If the revenues go up by 1%, then you have to have these public hearings and there's a notice in the paper. All right, so the revenues are up by 9.4%. Right, so it must trigger that.
Yes, it is triggering
We
that.
did-
And the public hearing on that is gonna be
Yes.
April 25th, right?
So the 9.4 here, that was, this is current year, right? This is the current year. So, and it did trigger it, and we did do that public hearing. It has, assessments are growing 9.47%.
That's average.
That's
Some
average
is higher, some is
for
lower.
24. It has again triggered the need for a public hearing ad, which is going to be April 25th.
April 25th at City Council.
But the
Yes,
hearing is on April.
that's right. It'll
Is
be-
there one at the convention center as well?
Yes,
The
that's
convention
April
center is the
19th.
19th.
And that's for the operating budget and bonds.
And so when those hearings are held, if there's a large number of people who'd say, I'd like you to cut back the rate to a lower rate, they're gonna do that, aren't they?
They're gonna certainly hear
They
it.
don't listen.
They're gonna listen?
They don't listen.
Okay, Vic? Thank you.
E-ticketing, does e-ticketing include, like speed cameras, red light or whatever, or is that just straight ticketing?
So red light cameras is a different program.
Okay.
So that e-ticketing, because that, how the red light camera program goes, it is another vendor. So they,
Right.
it's their cameras, their equipment, we lease it from them. A red light gets triggered, it goes to them, they process it, send that with the video footage to detectives or police, retired police officers, who then look at it and they determine whether it's warranted or not, so.
But it's not included in there.
Correct.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, anybody else have a question? Robert?
Joe, let me clarify this for anybody who may not know this process of the state law, parts A, B, and C. That tax neutral, in fact, goes into effect on that budget meeting day. Then a separate public hearing is held to raise the taxes if they decide to do so. And that's published in there too. So last year, they said, oh, it was tax neutral. It was actually an 8.6% increase. That's correct. This year, if you do a tax neutral, it'll probably take it down about 90 and a half cents or maybe 91 cents. So that goes down automatically to a tax neutral position. Then City Council, which they don't even understand the process, the mayor nor the vice mayor, they've already misspoke out in public. Then they vote to increase it back up to the 99 cents. That is a tax increase by state law, and anybody that says anything different, let me put it politely, is a liar. Totally.
So, something that, a tax rate on the real estate has to be established every year. Like, you have to establish it it doesn't automatically default, right? So there's no legislative action that if city council were to do nothing, then it becomes 90 cents and that automatically just gets applied and billed out. A rate has to be established by ordinance. So rate to rate, the adopted ordinance being 99 cents in the current year, if city council adopts a same rate in 99 cents in the 24 budget, the rate that was adopted by council action will not have changed. It'll be 99 cents to 99 cents.
But you will pay
No,
more in
it's a
in
tax-
taxes.
it's a
for-
tax
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 increase.
increase. You can't misdirect or mislead the public. I'm not talking about you personally, I'm talking about the city council and the mayor and the vice mayor. They're misleading the public and they say, oh, we're gonna keep it at 99 cents, no tax increase. That, again, is a lie. It's by state law, you are forced to do it. You are, that's
He
it. I mean,
understands that.
you understand it, but I want to make sure that when this message is going out, that the general public understands, this is a tax increase if you take it above the 90 cents or the 91, whatever it's going to be. We haven't got the number yet.
You're going to pay more.
Yeah.
You're going to pay more, and it's a tax increase. $2.75 decrease, that was a lie anyway.
Okay, well, okay, Tamara, you're next.
Shoot the messenger, huh?
Well, I know.
Yeah.
I said respectfully.
So my question was, about the 911 operators earlier, are they gonna find out about that?
She had the question about the
911 lately? You can't get. I was on hold for like 10 minutes.
I was on 20
Oh.
minutes, I was on hold with that.
So you're talking about the vacancies that they're experiencing?
Yeah, so like that EMS budget that you were talking about, is that going to include 911 operators?
So that's Emergency Communications Citizen Services, so ECCS. So they operate a 311, which if you just call the city, it's general, that, they do that. But they have a dedicated 911 division. They've been experiencing a high number of vacancies, more significantly higher in terms of a percentage of the workforce from other departments in the city. City Council's been putting initiatives forward, a lot of initiatives, signing bonuses, retention bonuses, recruitment initiatives. They've made a lot of progress in that. They're one that we can like throw up a towel and say, yay, we did it. They've made a lot of progress. They've had a lot of recent commitments to help get them over this, and they're excited about it. But I don't know when, if anybody calls it peak time, I think it's going to be peak time anyways, because there's a lot of redundant calls that happen for the same emergency service, and that's being reported in this particular area. So they're working as hard as they can to try to reduce any type of wait time that comes through on a critical call like 911.
Okay, next question.
I'll be glad to,
What?
I had a follow-up, because
What?
you
Okay, what is it?
questions and neither one of them got answered.
She doesn't think you answered it.
I'm sorry.
Well, no, they,
What's follow-up?
so with all of these studies that are being conducted, aren't there people within the city that can conduct studies that are already being paid? Why do we have to keep paying independent people to conduct studies?
Yeah, like that one on the district voting. Can't they just come out to all our civic leagues and stuff like that and say, hey, what do you think of this?
So
It doesn't seem like there's any accountability.
the district one, that's a specialized, I don't think there is city staff on hand that could do something that specialized.
City council can.
City council can.
Yeah, but in terms of other analysis and studies, we do stuff internally. I mean, my department, we do a lot of different analysis and look at things internally. Sometimes though, there are just things that are outside of our expertise and our skill sets. For example, the last time something in the water was conducted or occurred in 2019, the city contracted with ODU, Dr. Agarwal, to do an economic impact analysis. City staff helped assist in parts of it, but it was really their level of skill set and expertise that they were able to determine and put out a report as to what the economic impact of that was. And so we do, but it's just whenever it rises to a certain level and there's a certain skill set and specialty required, we typically do contract out.
Okay, he has a question.
Yeah, to be clear, this slide is talking about fiscal year 23, right?
Yes.
So for next year, I think you said the operating budget is going to go up by what, 3.39%?
Yes.
Is that right? So kind of related to Robert's question, to get that, given that the real estate values, I think roughly going by 8 or 9% up, then the rate should be down by 95 cents or something, right? To get you to the revenue, to get the operating budget growth.
The revenue neutral rate, I think is 90.7.
90.7.
90.7. But is that, when you say revenue neutral, does that account for the 3.39% growth in the budget?
This is the overall revenue growth, the 3.39%, right? So that's all the revenue sources.
That includes all the taxes.
Yeah, so up there is the real estate. So you'll see that real estate budget to budget's growing 7.9%,
right,
not the 9.5. The reason for that is relief programs, veterans tax relief programs, a state mandated program. Whenever you're looking at the revenue, so of the overall growth in the taxable revenue base, $21 million goes towards veterans, disabled veterans tax relief. And so you don't receive all 9.5% of the revenue growth, and we're seeing a 24% growth year over year in the tax relief programs. So as a result of that growth, that's the reason why, even though assessments are growing 9.5% on average, year-to-year budget growth in real estate is about 7.9.
Okay, Daphne has a question.
Okay. It's about appropriations. Have you appropriated or reappropriated any funds for light rail in 2022? And has any of the money been reappropriated to the construction, the
Norfolk Southern right away?
any of the construction companies reappropriated to them from our, like, the money that was left over from the 700 employees that we didn't have. Like, every year we have 700
Extra employees.
less employees, and all that money is being reappropriated. How much money total last year did you reappropriate out of everything?
In other words, you budgeted for it.
Good luck.
So what finance, and this is what makes this one challenging. So what finance would tell you is that in the operating budget last year, between the capital, the CIP and the operating budget, there was an obligation of $185 million of fund balance. So the fund balance would be what falls to the surplus at the end of the year. The utilization of that was only about $17 million, meaning there was $168 million roughish about that was unassigned, that made up that 8 to 12% fund balance that I'm talking about. So it wasn't actually necessarily obligated and reappropriated, especially not for light rail, or I'm not familiar with any light rail appropriation in several years. But that would be the unassigned fund balance that then becomes that 8 to 12% rainy day fund. Does
So
that make sense?
$168 million, you said,
Mhm.
is just
Sitting
every year?
Becomes-
I mean, is that what happens? $168 million.
No.
Wow.
It becomes the unassigned fund balance, which is the rainy day. So the importance of having that 8 to 12% is.
It's been raining and pouring for a long time. So every year we have an extra $160 million and you just find somewhere to spend it, but if you don't, so every year we've been accumulating $160 million.
No. No.
You roll that over?
Yeah, so what ends up happening is, at the end of the calculation, that becomes the unassigned, right? So that is the rainy day that whenever, and I've sat through several of them, but whenever you go to a rating agency or for a bond sale, something they're very mindful of is what that cash position is that's unobligated. So if that 168 million were to be picked up and obligated and spent towards something, they're gonna downgrade us.
Yeah.
So they're going
So
to.
they're overtaxing us $160 million every year.
You can look at it that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. They didn't spend it, because they didn't, yeah, they didn't. Yeah.
Can I get you back on track?
Oh! Go ahead, Pat.
Okay.
And then Teresa.
I would like to know what fund they are allocating that trip to South Carolina out of. Is that out of the TIP fund, or is that out of our tax fund?
Yeah, is there a budget item for that?
So the city council does have a municipal council operating budget.
Yes.
And so I would imagine that if they are to utilize their operating budget to cover a trip, then that would be a likely bill payer, which would be in the general fund.
Okay, Teresa?
What they're doing, it certainly is a vacation.
Looks that way, Teresa?
I want to ask kind of a layman's question that makes sense to me. If you have 700 positions and you have all this money, why are they not eliminated and the money returned back to the taxpayer? That's the way I would run it.
So the churning positions, so think of it this way. So say libraries represents 10 of those positions. Well, you take a snapshot in time and you look at, hey, libraries has 10 positions. All right, well, next year, well, they got 8. All right, well, they're still not doing what they, the 10 that they had last year and then the 8 that they have now, they're different. So the 8 positions that they might have now might be adult services or these other outreach programs at different library locations. So it sounds easy, well, like, yeah, just get rid of all of them. But if you get rid of all of them at that point in time, it's not like they're just not filling a service out there. They're filling those, they're rotating, that's a churn. But as we fill this child service program coordinator who's over here doing these reading children, this program. So that position's filled, but over here at the Kempsville, or the Great Neck Library now, we've got a librarian too that's now vacant, and that's the person that's keeping the circulation going. So it's not exactly like they're just out there not being used. That's just a churn that's happening within the workforce. Does that make sense?
Okay. You have the next question.
I have the next question. First off, does the state allow the city government to even have a rainy day fund? And who decides that it's going to be 12 to 18%, $165 million, or is it $250 million, $300 million?
So
who makes that decision?
So, city council sets the policy. So we just went through that with Davenport, a consultant who came in and looked at the city's financial outlook. They did a projection of the debt metrics, the cash position, the cash policies that the city has. They spoke with rating agencies. They got a feel for Virginia Beach's status. They did some benchmarking with other comparative localities of equal size to Virginia Beach who are also AAA rated. And Davenport came back and said City Council's policy of 8 to 12% is in line with the policy within other policies. The debt metric policies are in line, the most important being the 10% of general government debt service. And then they made some recommendations to modify a few of the other ones. But that is a city council policy, but it is at the recommendation of the consultant and financial advisors and the rating agencies to maintain that rainy day fund. Because if that does go away, they will flag that in terms of potential downgrading.
Tamara?
Do the consultants ever recommend not raising taxes?
Yeah.
Because they're getting paid to make a recommendation, so.
I would imagine.
Has it ever happened?
Yeah, typically we're not going to go and get a consultant. If it's clear that there's not a need for any type of rate adjustment, that's pretty obvious. But when we were looking at the projections of the Waste Management Fund and these other, using that one as an example, and the outlook on that and the unknowns of increase, compensation, and the recycling, we knew that there was a likely need. It was not on a sustainable course. So by bringing that consultant in, it allows not only just to see, hey, what's the rate needed, but allows them to look at the other things as well. Hey, look, you might be able to do this more efficiently over here, and here's some options. Did you consider this? So it's a little bit more of a comprehensive type thing of looking at what the overall fund needs are.
Okay, Lorraine, and then Leslie.
Can you tell me, please, how much money has been reallocated for developers or for developments down to the oceanfront or near that area?
So how much has been reallocated for developers?
From the money that you tell us that is there.
So the only allocation in terms of a developer type led project that I can think of right now is obviously the Atlantic Park. That's across all the 4 CIP projects, 140 million? 140 million.
140 million.
Okay. And that's coming from the TIP fund or from the revenue generated by the project?
The TIP fund.
Coming from the TIP fund.
And that's all you know of?
Yeah.
There's, in terms of a development, like a big approved construction development right now, yes. There's other projects that are appropriated and have funds on them to continue to look at and for future considerations of investment, but nothing in terms of we have an agreement with the developer, and the developer is getting any type of contribution out of it.
So if anything comes up during the year, right, and they want to do a private public partnership and they want money from us, where would that money come from since you don't have it in the budget? Would it come from fund balance?
Does it come from our refunds that are sitting in there? Money?
It depends on what the structure of the project is gonna look like. If it's so for example, it just depends, there's options. If a part of a development was for public infrastructure related to parking, there's existing parking projects programmed within the CIP, within the TIP fund, and that's backed by, it's in the programmed out years, it's backed by an estimate use of bonds or public facility revenue bonds. Those would not materialize until the project is actually spent and utilized, but there's flexibility out there like that. So it just kind of depends on what the situation might be.
Yeah, so I was thinking, next, Leslie's next, but during the year, you had like, there was a developer that wanted a parking garage and everything, and they were within the town center thing where, we're supposed to like do that for them because, they don't have to provide it themselves. So that money would come from them.
It depends. I mean, it depends on the direction we have from council. It could be a redirect from other projects. It could be the town center TIF. It could be, it
So they just look for the money.
So they have a tip there at Town Center because it's a tourist area?
It's a TIF.
It's a TIF to pay for Town Center.
Okay.
Tax increment financing district.
Okay.
Leslie?
We've been asked to tighten our belts, and I want to know when is the city going to tighten their belt? Because it's going to come to a point where we can't live in the city anymore. I'm on a fixed income, and you're making it harder and harder for us to live here for a lifetime.
Okay, go ahead.
Actually, I have a related question. This slide is about revenue side. You have a slide on the expenditure side. Maybe you had it, I missed it. Kind of what's the expected increase in the revenues for the coming year? Yeah, expenditures.
In the expenditures.
Yeah, because.
The percentage is the same.
Huh?
The percentage is the same.
3.3, yeah, so you're,
it would,
3.39, but you don't have a detail of line by line.
No,
Not
it's,
here, but
it is in the executive summary, so,
how can we get a copy?
And that's online.
It's online.
That's online. You can go to the budget and they have an executive summary, an operations summary, a budget, and a
The operating
CIP
budget.
summary.
What's the website for that?
VB.gov,
Right on the front page.
right? Go ahead.
Yeah, you had said that there's outside, sort of like an independent audit of the budget versus other areas. Is that, do you know the name of the company, or is that available for us to review?
The outside audit.
Well, yeah, and so you compared your budget, like you were talking about with the surplus. You said, well, is that in line? And they said, yeah, for your size city, this, that, the other company said that was in line.
Oh.
So I'm saying, is there an outside thing that looks at all the budget items and says, okay, that's comparable to this city, that city, or some of it?
I mean, we don't have a comprehensive document that compares department by department, program by program. There are some localities that, or some organizations that have that information. UNC,
Okay.
yeah, well, the Auditor of Public Accounts.
Yeah, it's time. We need to like stop this. We can't.
Real quick question. Why, the Department of Defense, when they go out for bids or contracts, they have to have competitive bids. Why does the city only do single contractors for bids? They don't go out for competitive bids.
So it would be the procurement or purchasing side that would be better to answer, but I can tell you, anytime I've ever had to go out for anything or make a significant purchase, it's done through a competitive bid contract.
Construction though?
Construction. There, in terms of maintenance, contract. There might be a continuation of an existing contract that they have that they're utilizing, but the city follows all procurement and purchasing requirements as set by, state
Is that
code.
online, the requirements for purchasing?
I would imagine.
Is it? Okay.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you.
Thank you.